Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking about a problem that almost every English learner experiences at some point. You listen to English, you read English, and you understand most of it. You can watch movies, follow conversations, and maybe even think in English sometimes. But when it's your turn to speak, suddenly everything disappears. You forget words, your sentences feel slow and awkward, and you start to feel nervous. If this sounds familiar, you are not alone. Many learners around the world say the same thing: I understand English, but I can't speak it. In today's episode, we're going to explore why this happens and, more importantly, what you can do to change it. Let's start with a simple idea. Understanding a language and speaking a language are two different skills. They are connected, but they are not the same. Think about it like sports. Watching football and playing football both involve the same game, but the skills are different. You can understand the rules, know the players, and follow every match, but that doesn't mean you can play well on the field. Speaking English is like playing, not watching. When you listen or read, your brain is receiving information. This is called passive language use. Your brain only needs to recognize words and understand meaning. But when you speak, your brain must create sentences, choose the correct grammar, find the right words, and pronounce them clearly. This is active language use, and it is much more difficult. So the first important point is this: it is completely normal to understand more than you can say. Another reason you may understand English but struggle to speak is that you have had much more practice with input than with output. Many learners spend years studying grammar, reading textbooks, watching videos, and listening to teachers. All of these activities are very useful, but they mainly train your listening and reading skills. If you don't spend enough time speaking, your speaking muscles stay weak. Yes, speaking really is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger and faster it becomes. But if you only study and never practice speaking, your brain doesn't build the connections it needs to produce language quickly. So when someone asks you a question in English, your brain has to work very hard to build a sentence from the beginning. That is why you feel slow and unsure. Let's talk about another big factor: fear of making mistakes. Many learners are afraid to speak because they don't want to sound stupid, make grammar errors, or be judged by others. This fear can be very powerful. It can stop you from speaking even when you know the words in your head. You might start a sentence and then stop because you're not sure about the grammar. Or you might choose to stay silent because you're afraid people will laugh at your accent. The problem is that mistakes are a natural and necessary part of learning any language. Children make thousands of mistakes when they learn to speak their first language, and nobody expects them to be perfect. But as adults, we often expect ourselves to speak perfectly from the beginning. This is unrealistic and can block your progress. If you never allow yourself to make mistakes, you never give yourself the chance to improve. There is also something called translation in your head. Many learners think in their native language first, and then they try to translate their thoughts into English before speaking. This process takes time and creates stress. While you are translating, the conversation continues, and you may feel that you are too slow. This makes you more nervous, and your mind can go blank. To speak more naturally, you need to start thinking directly in English. This doesn't happen overnight, but with practice, it becomes easier. When you hear and use English often, your brain begins to store common phrases and structures as whole pieces, not as separate words that need translation. This is why people who live in English-speaking countries often improve their speaking faster. They are surrounded by English and use it all day, so their brain learns to operate directly in the language. Another important point is vocabulary. You may understand many words when you hear them, but that doesn't mean you can use them easily when you speak. There is a difference between passive vocabulary and active vocabulary. Passive vocabulary includes words you recognize and understand when you read or hear them. Active vocabulary includes the words you can quickly remember and use when you speak or write. Usually, your passive vocabulary is much larger than your active vocabulary. For example, you might understand the word complicated when you hear it, but when you try to speak, you might only remember simpler words like hard or difficult. This is normal. Words move from passive to active vocabulary only when you use them regularly in speaking or writing. Now that we understand the reasons behind this problem, let's talk about solutions. What can you actually do to move from understanding English to speaking it confidently? The first and most important step is simple: speak more. This may sound obvious, but many learners avoid speaking because it feels uncomfortable. You don't need perfect conditions to start speaking. You can begin by talking to yourself. Describe what you are doing, talk about your plans for the day, or explain a topic you recently learned. Speaking alone may feel strange at first, but it is a powerful way to train your brain to produce English without pressure. Another useful method is shadowing. Shadowing means listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say almost at the same time. You can do this with podcasts, movies, or YouTube videos. This exercise helps you improve your pronunciation, rhythm, and speed. It also helps your brain learn natural sentence patterns, so you don't have to build every sentence from zero. Recording yourself is also very helpful. Many learners don't like hearing their own voice in English, but this is a great way to notice your mistakes and track your progress. You can record yourself speaking about a topic for 1 or 2 minutes, then listen and think about what you did well and what you can improve. Over time, you will hear that your speaking becomes smoother and more confident. Of course, speaking with other people is one of the best ways to improve. If you have the chance, try to find a language partner or join online speaking groups. There are many apps and websites where you can talk to other learners or native speakers. The key is to make speaking a regular habit, not something you do only once in a while. Even short conversations a few times a week can make a big difference. It is also important to change your mindset about mistakes. Instead of seeing mistakes as something negative, try to see them as useful information. Every time you make a mistake, you learn something about the language. Maybe you used the wrong verb tense, or maybe you forgot an article like a or the. These small errors show you exactly what you need to practice. Without mistakes, you don't know what to improve. Another strategy is to learn and practice chunks of language instead of single words. For example, instead of only learning the word decision, learn phrases like make a decision, a difficult decision, or I decided to. Native speakers often use these fixed expressions, and using them will make your speech sound more natural. It also makes speaking easier because you don't have to build every sentence from individual pieces. You can also prepare for common speaking situations. Think about topics that often appear in conversations, such as introducing yourself, talking about your job, describing your hobbies, or giving your opinion about a movie or a book. Prepare a few sentences or phrases for these situations and practice them until they feel natural. This way, when the moment comes, you don't have to think too much. You already have the language ready in your mind. Let's also talk about pronunciation. Sometimes learners avoid speaking because they feel that their accent is too strong or that people will not understand them. It is true that clear pronunciation is important, but remember that having an accent is completely normal. Almost everyone who speaks a second language has an accent. Your goal should be to be understandable, not to sound exactly like a native speaker. To improve pronunciation, listen carefully to how native speakers stress words and use intonation in sentences. English is a stress-timed language, which means some words are stronger and longer than others. Practicing with shadowing and repeating full sentences, not just single words, will help you sound more natural and be easier to understand. Another helpful habit is to think in English during small moments of your day. For example, when you are walking somewhere, cooking, or waiting in line, try to describe what you see or what you are doing in English in your mind. This is a simple way to train your brain to work in English without needing a conversation partner. Over time, this reduces the need to translate from your native language. It's also important to be patient with yourself. Speaking fluently is one of the last skills to develop in a new language. Listening and reading usually improve first because they are easier for the brain. So if you understand a lot but struggle to speak, it often means you are actually making good progress. Your brain has already built a strong base of knowledge. Now you just need to train it to use that knowledge actively. Let's imagine two learners. The first learner studies grammar every day, watches English videos, and reads books, but almost never speaks. The second learner studies a bit less grammar but speaks regularly, even if they make many mistakes. After a year, who do you think will speak more confidently? In most cases, it will be the second learner. This shows us that practice and real use of the language are more important than perfect knowledge. Before we finish, I want to give you a small action plan you can start using today. First, choose one topic each day and speak about it in English for at least 2 minutes. You can talk to yourself or record your voice. Second, listen to English every day and try shadowing for a few minutes. Third, try to have at least one real conversation in English each week, even if it is short. And finally, don't be afraid of mistakes. Treat them as steps forward, not as failures. Remember, the gap between understanding and speaking is a normal part of language learning. It doesn't mean you are bad at English or that you will never become fluent. It simply means that your brain has practiced one skill more than the other. With regular speaking practice, that gap will slowly become smaller and smaller. One day, you will notice that you start speaking without thinking so much. Words will come to your mind faster, sentences will feel more natural, and conversations will become less stressful and more enjoyable. That moment is not magic. It is the result of many small practice sessions, many mistakes, and many attempts to communicate. So if you often feel frustrated because you understand English but can't speak it well, take it as a sign that you are closer to fluency than you think. You already have the knowledge inside your head. Now it's time to give that knowledge a voice. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you found this topic helpful, you can listen again and even try to repeat some of the sentences out loud. That's also a form of speaking practice. Keep learning, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep speaking.